Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple of actually very simple, quick and simple cards. I did some 3D embossing folders, a favorite, on Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, also a favorite. Oxide inks on Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, favorite. Splatter, all of my favorite things into a couple of cards. So just keep watching and I will show you guys how I made them. So of course the first step is to do the 3D embossing. So I'm using the Simon Says Stamp embossing folder and cutting die. This is the Darcy Bouquet. It does come with wafer dies that'll die cut the 3 main flowers, but I didn't use them for these cards. And when I use specifically Simon's 3D embossing folders, because it varies by brand, all brands have different options for your die cutting machine, sandwiches, etc. And then that can also vary by personal experience, personal taste. So for me, it's my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine with the original platform, and then I just have 2 metal shims, and then my folder, my cardstock that I lightly mist with water. That's why I have my little flour sack cloth out. That's just to keep me from getting water everywhere, because you know what's going to happen. So I lightly mist it, line it up in the folder, and then run it through my die cut machine, and it works perfect every time. Love it. So, honestly, like ones like this, you could just leave like this. And I think I've even done a video like that where I embossed it on Desert Storm and then like added a sentiment. Either or else I thought about it. I can't even remember. I've done so many videos. Anyway, my other favorite thing, like I said, is Oxide inks on Kraft or Desert Storm cardstock. There is just something about the muted or more muted look you get with the oxides on this, and I don't think I'll ever tire of it. I love it. So since I was doing 2, I used the same colors, and I used Salvaged Patina, Saltwater Taffy, and Victorian Velvet. And one of them, like the one on the right, I just did like the kind of typical strips gradient, and then the other one I just did a little more random, because why not? So very simple blending. And then I grabbed my white pigment ink pad, and I grabbed a brush for this. You can actually apply the ink like directly from the ink pad. You just very light hand with that. But since I used Oxide inks on these backgrounds, I didn't want the ink pad to pick up all those colors, because it's a white ink pad. I don't want, to contaminate the white ink. So I just used one of my this is a honeybee blending brush, and I just lightly tapped it into the white pigment ink. And again, very difficult to show pressure in a video, but very light handed with this. So I'm only picking up more like the raised edges. Right now, this shows up more. It is going to kind of soak in with the Oxide inks, and it's going to be much more subtle. In fact, on camera, it looks almost like nothing in the end, but in real life, it's still picked up. You can see like there's lighter areas, and it's subtle, but it gives it that little extra something. And this also looks even nicer if you do, you could just do dark color cardstock, run it through with an embossing folder, and then use the pigment ink and just use that lightly over top to, give it that little extra something. You can do this with metallic inks, with Oxide, with anything, really. Just depends on what you're going for. So of course I'm going to add splatter, and decided to do 3 different colors. I did just white gouache with, put that on my little palette and added a bit of water to thin it out. And then I used Saltwater Taffy Distress Paint, and then Salvaged Patina Distress Paint. So 3 different types of splatter, but it just gives it that little extra something. And like I said, splatter is my favorite, and you can never go wrong. So did all that with my little fan brush, and then off camera, washed my fan brush, wiped off my palette. Distress paint does dry permanent, so you do not want to leave it in your brushes. It will ruin them, etc. So after I did that, I set those aside to let them dry. And off camera, I die cut just scraps of white cardstock and the Neenah Desert Storm cardstock with this new CZ Design Just a Note wafer die. And this is a little, what I call the finicky type. The letters are, although thankfully like the whole thing's almost all one, just the letter A is separate. And with ones like this, when I apply my adhesive, and this is just Kraft tacky glue in a Gina K precision bottle, I tap my finger on the back of it after I've added adhesive, because again, you can't really tell on camera, but in real life I've got like some little blobs going on here, like there's too much glue. So I just tap it with my finger, and I'm wearing an apron, or else I have, my flour sack cloth, etc. beside me, and then I just wipe the glue off on there. So it just keeps it from getting everywhere. So did that, used my little reverse tweezers to hold the little tiny letter there and got that into place. And then my backgrounds were dry, so I trimmed these down with my guillotine trimmer. I ended up trimming them down to like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Yeah. And off camera, I trimmed down some white cardstock to just slightly larger than that, because my original plan was to adhere this to a white card base. But then I was like, ooh, if I frame it with white, that'll give it a nice little frame. And then my card base is going to be the Neenah Desert Storm again. Just cause I love it, So I adhered those together with Kraft tacky glue. Once these are adhered, like I said, card bases are going to be Neenah Desert Storm as well. And I just cut a sheet in half, and then I'm going to score that at 5.5. But before I get to that, which I forgot, twine. This is AmyR's jute twine. The last time I used the other stuff, I have it in both ivory and jute. This one is more closer to the Kraft color. Okay, it just depends. And yeah, just FYI, these rolls are insane. Like 400 yards. Lifetime supply. Lifetime times however many supply. I've had these rolls for years. Haven't even made a dent in them. So I wrapped it around my little card front, and then using my reverse tweezers, because it's like an extra little pair of fingers that don't get in the way, I can hold the knot closed, fiddle with the bow, get it the way I want it, tighten it, perfection. So I'm going to do that to both card fronts. And then the sentiment, I'm going to pop up with just some thin foam strips. These are the waffle flower foam strips that I love. So I'm going to pop that onto the back of the sentiment. Once I've got that on the back of there, I can pop this onto my card base or card front. And again, I'm going to repeat the exact same thing for the second card. Didn't bother filming that because it's just repetitive. So got that popped into place. And then I made my card bases, which, like I said, Neenah Desert Storm cardstock. Cut the sheet in half lengthwise. Then I score at 5.5, so they'll be top folding A2 sized cards. Once I've got the card bases made, for the insides, I am using the So Talkative stamp set. This came out last year, the year before. It's been out for a while. I've used it a lot. It's got some really good sentiments in it. So for this, and I've shown this many times, to ink up, like especially with sentiments, like multiple colors, I like using just my blending brushes. It works perfect. And these 3 already had the colors on them. I have to do this multiple times because these are light colors. I'm stamping a sentiment and it's on Desert Storm cardstock. You can see it in real life much, much better. And I show at the end too, like I tilt it a little bit because my lights kind of make it a little more blown out. But depending on what colors you're using, what you're doing, if you find it's not dark enough for your liking, you could just stamp this onto a panel of white cardstock, trim it down, stick it on the inside of the card. Like that would work great too. I liked the more subtle look, and again, in real life it looks better. So I did these I think 3 times each, just lightly inking with the brush, because I've mentioned that before. When you use the brushes to do the inking on the stamps, you are getting a lighter version, because you're not pressing the ink pad directly onto the stamp. So sometimes that's the exact look I'm going for, or you just need to build up some layers of it to actually get it to full concentration. So after I did that on the insides, I'm going to adhere the card fronts to the card bases with the Kraft tacky glue. And then as a final little bit of embellishment, very subtle too. These are Pearly Gates confetti from Trinity Stamps. And just subtle, pretty and subtle. They've got some shimmer to them, but they're not super busy, and the adhesive will dry clear into them, so they show up a little bit more while the glue's still wet, and then they just work. They're so pretty, really. Anyway, adhered them into place, which is little dabs of Kraft tacky glue. Once those are adhered, these cards are complete. So I'll tilt them in, closer up to kind of show you guys the texture and all that of the 3D embossing folder, because again, my lights just make them look But I have photos at the end, like always, and then in the description box below the video, I have a link to my blog post where I have the photos, in full size you can click on. I'll have the supply list with picture links to everything. So if you're interested in any of that, you can just expand the description box below the video, and all of that is there for you guys. As always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And stay tuned. I still have tons and tons of videos coming. So I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.